Hello, friends, and welcome back to Stories About Entitled People. The customer who did not want to pay the bills got the wrong worker, a worker who knows how to stand up for himself. But before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to our channel if you're new here and turn on notifications so you don't miss a new video every single day. Here we go. Don't pay me for months? Enjoy unburying your car. My stepdad works as a landscaper and does snow in the winter. He had many clients in one townhouse community. One time he had this lady who was a regular client at first, always paid on time, always polite, etc. However, over time, the lady started to get slow with her payments and wasn't home when he was there. Eventually, she fell behind, and when my stepdad went to collect, she had the audacity to say, "I've never seen you in my life." In a stern voice, not acting like someone with dementia or someone who genuinely didn't recognize the person. Afterwards, he asked his other clients in the neighborhood about her, and they all said she was insane. Cue the revenge. My stepdad makes it a point to recruit both of her neighbors as new clients. My stepdad comes back with his friend after a 1.5-foot snowstorm. There are 2 driveways to the left and right of hers, with the way the townhouses are set up. He instructs his friend to blow every inch of snow from both driveways directly onto hers, and they get to work. They purposely did this when she was home, and she came out livid. His friend pretended not to speak English, and my stepdad said, probably with the biggest grin on his face, "I'm sorry, I've never seen you in my life," and left. Edit. This lady was around her mid-30s and definitely did not have dementia. She also called his phone and left an angry message after he did it, so she did recognize him. I understand this might not have been the most legal and ethical way to deal with it, but revenge is revenge. And our second story. Revenge in the Army. I was in the Army, and while away on a 4-day pass, my barracks room was broken into, and a significant amount of my military equipment, helmet, backpack, weapons, web belt, ammo carrier, etc., was stolen to the tune of approximately $800 in 1984 dollars. When I returned, there were tool marks on the locked room door, and it was clearly a break-in. I notified my platoon sergeant and first sergeant, and they said to call the military police. Then the company commander/commanding officer who outranked us called me and stated he didn't want the break-in being reported to the military police because then our company would show up in the higher-level division police blotter, and this would make him, the company commander/commanding officer, CO, look bad. So he told me to do a report of survey, a form used to be reimbursed for lost equipment, and I wouldn't have to pay for the stolen equipment, whose replacement costs were a month's pay. Well, I submitted the paperwork, and without the police report, my request to be reimbursed was denied, and I was told I'd have to pay for all the stolen equipment. I was shocked because it was a lot of money, and I was just about to leave the Army to go back to college. I needed that money to survive. The CO told me it was a tough break and there was nothing he could do to help me, even though it was his orders I had followed. Well, it turns out, just a week before we found out the division would not replace my stolen equipment, I had led our company through a nuclear, biological, and chemical weapons evaluation exercise. That was my specialty in the Army, and the spineless CO sat out the exercise and just observed. This placed me in a leadership position to do his job, while a captain from our Division HQ graded our actions. I was a junior sergeant who had to maneuver, lead, and direct a whole company of 120 men, including senior lieutenants, to a staging area 5 miles away, through the security procedures to secure the decontamination site, and then lead the cleaning of our men, tanks, and equipment from the simulated chemical attack. I had never maneuvered an armored company before, but I did it, and the other sergeants and lieutenants in the unit were shocked that the CEO hadn't helped me during the exercise. The process went well, and at the end, a captain from division who was evaluating us congratulated me on doing a good job. In front of the company, this captain then explained our next steps we would do. He made a mistake and told the troops wrong information, that in combat we'd get them killed. I was leaving the Army, but I cared enough about my fellow soldiers to want them to be combat proficient, so politely and respectfully I corrected what the captain had said, but he clearly resented me making him look silly. I guess he was embarrassed a lower-ranking soldier corrected him, and that made him noticeably embarrassed. At the end of the debriefing, I was walking back to my armored vehicle to radio our HQ that now we had completed our decontamination, a requirement of the exercise, and were operational again. and this captain followed me away from the other soldiers. He asked what I was going to do, and I told him I was about to make the radio call to HQ, and he told me that wouldn't be necessary. I could just tell him what I would say. I told him, and he told me our unit had passed the evaluation. Luckily for me, my first sergeant overheard him say this to me. Now, fast forward to where I find out that my equipment would not be replaced, and a couple days later, I was called into the CO's office with my first sergeant and told our company had flunked the training evaluation because I hadn't made that radio call. I was getting out of the Army, so I didn't really care, but it was bad news for my CO. I was shocked because the other captain, who outraked me, told me not to make the radio call, that our unit was decontaminated and operational again. Turns out the captain was immature and mad at me since I'd embarrassed him in front of all the soldiers in my unit. I was still angry at the CO for ordering me not to call police about my barracks room break-in, and how he didn't care that I would now have to pay a lot of money to replace my stolen equipment. So I didn't defend myself or tell the CO what really happened with the evaluation or that captain. When I left the CO's office, the first sergeant told me he heard the other captain tell me not to make that radio call, but not to say anything. Our CO was a jerk who would get us all killed in a war, and his unit flunking the evaluation made him look really bad, so he asked me to keep my mouth shut. A couple weeks later, the CO was rude to a sick soldier in our unit while I was out processing to leave the Army. Everyone hated him even more for this, so our supply sergeant, who was retiring from the Army, and after the CO signed for all the military equipment in the supply room, told me he couldn't believe the CO had screwed me over my stolen equipment and that he'd help me. So he handed me the keys to the supply room that the CO hadn't collected and told me to take whatever military equipment I would need to replace my stolen equipment, since the CO was now responsible to replace everything in the supply room with his money. He also apologized that some of the replacement equipment I would need was not in the supply room, and he felt bad I would still have to pay a couple $100 out of pocket to replace some of the stolen equipment. The supply sergeant also answered my questions about where all the backup training logs for our unit's weapons and physical training tests were kept. We were about to be inspected by higher headquarters, and these records were super important for the CO to pass the inspection and be promoted and not be kicked out of the Army. The day before I got out of the Army with an honorable discharge, and just a couple days before this huge important inspection, it was discovered that the whole company's year's worth of weapons training records, the backup records, and electronic records were missing or wiped clean. The CO had to explain this embarrassing situation to his bosses, who were not happy with him. His unit had already flunked the NBC evaluation, and now his unit had failed to properly maintain training records. Even worse, his unit's training budget was completely over budget with costs off the charts, and the division had to come up with a lot of money to cover the ammo cost to re-qualify the whole company on all our weapons, plus time from other duties to redo our physical tests, PT, of running, push-ups, etc. Just as bad, advanced training would have to be canceled to redo all the basic weapons qualification training that had to be completed once again. There was no way the CO could avoid receiving a bad performance appraisal, which would end any chance of him getting promoted, thus effectively ending his military career. Meanwhile, my fellow soldiers loved it because they liked to shoot machine guns, throw grenades, shoot cannons, etc. My last day in the Army at morning formation, as everyone was getting ready to do makeup PT tests and later all day do makeup weapon qualifications for several more days, my awesome first sergeant told me that all the disappearing records was the best ETS, in term of service prank, he'd ever seen. I, of course, replied that I didn't know what he was talking about. He laughed, winked at me, and told me I was a good soldier and that he'd miss me. He then shook my hand and wished me well. And our last story. Where's Alex? I worked at a bar my freshman year and had a manager who was incredibly patronizing and rude. She would speak to everyone in the most disrespectful way and was even worse with the employees of color. She indicated she thought we were stupid all the time. My coworker, Alex, a black busser, got it the worst. She might as well have been calling him boy. We complained on his behalf several times and nothing happened. It was also well known he was working a lot to pay down some unexpected debt. One day I came around the corner and she was yelling the classic, "If you don't like it, then quit whenever you like." Alex just turned red and shook it off. 2 days later, he tells me he has another job and will work both for a while and cut back on this one. One day after that was one of our busiest days of the year, but not worth it because tips are sporadic because everyone gets so trashed. One of the two bussers called out sick. My manager was pissed. Alex became the only busser. She refused to help him. At one point, I couldn't find him, so I just started bussing my tables because I had a busy but chill section, but still, dishes were piling up in the bag. I called the manager to help. She said something rude about him, came upstairs, and actually waited by the bathroom door pacing. So creepy and inappropriate. She got a male coworker to check. No one on staff was in there. Then she went upstairs. His stuff was gone. His locker was open with a piece of paper that says, "F you, manager, I quit. Now." Happy St. Patrick's Day. Manager had to do the work of two giant men all night for no tips. We made bank not having to tip out any bussers. No other coworker would come in to help because they hated her. She cried when she saw we made over $500 in less than 6 hours, and she couldn't have any. I found out later the bussers planned it, and one pretended to be sick so they could force her to work the most chaotic day of the year, and then all of Alex's shifts for a week. She suspected but couldn't prove it. His new job was apparently way better and full-time. Edit, more details. She was asked to leave because she was causing too much tension, and it reached a boiling point when she said a number of racist things and kept misgendering someone. I think they realized she was a liability. Definitely didn't really care about us, but this was after 2 years of her. But upper management was really dysfunctional and barely present. She claimed she was mean because she had wanted kids, but was still single, so whenever it was one of her nieces or nephew's birthday, she had 10 of them, I think, she would get sad. And she told me I should be sympathetic because I have a man, and no one will date her, not even fat dudes. She was something, LOL. I've never understood why people treat other people like trash. It's like they think they'll never need anyone around them. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.